So you're looking at the Sony A6100 and the Canon M200 because you want a camera to create all of your awesome online content ideas. From baking cakes, to frying up some donuts, or even cranking out some awesome ice cream. Yeah, I probably shouldn't write these scripts like right before lunch when I'm definitely starving. But you were looking at these specific cameras because you want to save some dough. And you don't necessarily want to invest in a fancy red cinema camera or anything, and you don't want to film in 8K. I can appreciate that. So between these new budget options from the two most popular camera brands, which comes out on top for the online content creator? Let's find out. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. So generally, people fall into one camp or the other. Canon skin tone enthusiasts or Sony spec fans. Get this, I'm gonna blow your mind right now. I'm gonna blow your mind, and I'm gonna tell you that you can actually like both at the same time. I know that's crazy. It's like the antithesis of online camera discourse, but I tell you, believe in me, because in fact, it actually can happen, because I like both brands. We're currently recording on the Canon EOS R, which is divisive in its own right, and I use the Sony A6400 all of the time as a B cam. Both of these companies make good things. I start this video off that way because I'm not going to hate on either of these cameras. If you came here to see like Canon bashing or Sony bashing, you're not gonna find that here. If I'm gonna hate on these, it's gonna come from their own pitfalls. And you know what? There are some in these cameras. Before we get into those pitfalls, however, I would like to thank my friends over at B&H Photo for loaning me both of these cameras to check out and make this series of videos on. If you end up deciding to get one of these powerful budget packages, there will be links in the description below. I would throw these around and juggle them, but I can't juggle, and I don't want to break these cameras. There are three categories of functionality that I compare every single camera against, because I could just sit here and for 15 minutes read you the specifications on these. And trust me, that would be way easier. But that's also boring. And I don't want to be boring. Or I want to be less boring. So we'll focus on video quality, ease of use, and the ecosystem / upgrade path. First up, the reason you buy a video camera, video quality. Both the A6100 and the M200 have a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor. Now that sounds pretty similar, but in actuality, there is a slight difference in size, where the Sony is just a little bit bigger, giving it an overall 1.5 times crop as opposed to a full frame camera, while the Canon has a 1.6 times crop because its APS-C is just a little bit smaller. Both of these can record in up to 4K video with a couple of asterisks involved with each of the cameras. Sony's asterisk is that it can record in the full width of the sensor at 24 frames per second, but has a 1.2-ish additional crop if you're gonna use 30 frames per second. And as somebody that uses 30 frames per second, it is a little bit more of a crop. Canon's asterisk is a little bit bigger. A little bit. It can only do 24 frames per second, and when it does that, it gains a much bigger crop in addition to losing its better autofocusing system, which we'll talk much more about later. When it comes to 1080p though, both can record up to 60 frames per second for regular recording, but the Sony can do slow motion in camera at up to 1080p at 120 frames per second. The Canon maxes out at 720p. So yes, when it comes to overall recording resolutions, the Sony is the clear absolute winner. But if you want a little more control over your image, the Canon actually starts to pull ahead. One of the overall negatives of the A6100 is it's totally lacking any of these Sony picture profiles. I hope you like these standard settings, because that's what you're gonna get, period. You can't really control how the image looks besides the exposure triangle. Where on the Canon or on the M200, you do get access to a few of their overall picture profiles, and you can edit those to give you a little more control over the image coming out of the camera. My personal favorite is I use the M200, and basically all the Canon cameras, is I use the neutral setting with the contrast turned all the way down. Neither of these cameras has any kind of log recording capabilities, which at this price point isn't that surprising, but they are starting to fall behind as the competition is starting to include more professional level codecs and picture controls in their lower end cameras. The one that definitely comes to mind when I say this is the Fuji X-T30. It gives both log and 4K 30 frames per second with a high bitrate codec options, and it's in the same price range. It's a beast of a camera. But technical image junk, because it is junk, out of the way, how does the image look on both? I mean, I think it's pretty darn good. The A6100 does have that 6K Sony sensor that is downsampling to its 4K, continuing the excellence of the Sony APS-C cameras. I mean, that's what they are known for. You get plenty of dynamic range, crazy sharp images. It just looks good, even though you only get the standard picture profile. Using the 1080p on the M200 works perfectly fine for the price point, and giving me that extra functionality over the picture profiles does give you more options over what the final product will look like if you want to change it up a little bit. If you want 1080p, it's hard to argue against a budget Canon camera. But if you really need that 4K, there's not much in the market at this price point that can beat Sony for 4K. But technical image quality isn't the only thing that makes up this series of moving pictures that you're looking at right now that approximate human movement. And I constantly argue that audio is actually the most important part of the whole experience. There's a reason I spend a lot of time making sure the audio is right as opposed to just the image quality. Both of these cameras have a 3.5 microphone in port, giving you the ability to use external microphones. Both also have the ability to lower their internal preamp gain down to let the microphone do more of the work, because you want cameras to do as little of the audio processing as possible. However, I am going to have to give the audio quality to the Sony, because Sony cameras, they just sound good. There isn't any two ways about it. Sony have some of the best internal preamps that you are going to find. I mean, they're just amazing. It's not that, and the thing is, it's not that the M200 is bad, because it's not. It's just not as good audio-wise as the A6100. One audio problem though with both cameras, which again will come up more in the ease of use department, but the way the screen flips up, it will get in the way if you're gonna use a quote-unquote more traditional shotgun style of microphone. There isn't even a hot shoe mount on the M200, so you will have to get like a cage, or in the A6100 case, you'll have to get the, I don't know that there's a technical name for it, but like a cold shoe mover so that you can get the microphone out of the way of the screen, because this will totally block the screen. But for quality, yes, 100% goes to the Sony. Speaking of ease of use, what a great segue to the best section. Ease of use. Look, basically how easy a camera is to use is far more important than any sort of technical quality, either image or audio-wise, because most modern cameras easily pass the hurdle of good enough. Cell phones easily pass the hurdle of good enough. I mean, there has not been a major camera brand that has released a camera in the last few years that couldn't pass the barrier for good enough, either image quality or audio quality wise. However, there have been some that have just been terrible to use. When you are cranking out content on a constant basis, you need a camera that basically operates itself as much as possible. That means flip screens, good audio, good autofocus, good stabilization, good user interface. I mean, it just has to work and be part of the team. Both of these cameras have great autofocus in their primary recording modes, 4K for the Sony and 1080p for the Canon. I know there are online arguments about which is better, Canon's dual pixel autofocus or Sony's phase detection, but seriously, they're both so good that you'd never be able to tell the difference if you're just looking at straight up like, will you be in focus? Yes, you will be in focus with both of these cameras. Neither of these cameras has built-in on-sensor stabilization, which sucks, but they do have several lens options that have optical stabilization built into it. Plus the M200 has electronic image stabilization that it will crop in just a little bit on your overall image, but in my opinion, it does okay taking out the handshake. I drink a lot of coffee, my hand shakes a lot. It won't give you Panasonic levels of stabilization, but for a handshake, it does work to smooth it out pretty well if you're just like using it, if you're just hand holding the camera. And another big ease of use win for the Canon M200 is while both cameras have flip up screens, the Canon, much like the rest of their line, has a fully touch-enabled menu system. And when setting the camera up, it's not that big of a deal. It's actually much easier to use the Sony camera if you're gonna set it up the first time. Once you get used to it, you've got all of these buttons and just, you gotta have more physical buttons and dials. But if you are in front of the camera, like I spend all of my time in front of the camera, being able to change the settings while in front of it is just so good. I mean, seriously, I've used, no kidding, just about every camera brand on the market. Sony, Canon, Panasonic, Fuji, Olympus, Nikon. I've used practically everything. And since I spend all of my time in front of the camera, I love being able to change things without having to guess. Like if you have a camera that doesn't monitor you or doesn't have a touch screen, you have to like guess and mess around. You have to reach behind the camera when it's in front of you and screw around with it. I don't like that. I like a camera that I can easily dial it in while being in front of the camera. It saves you so much time. And now that we've covered image quality and ease of use, it's time to hop outside and put this in practice in the quickest, most succinct way possible. And boy, oh boy, that's a vlogging test. See ya out there.
Okay, and this is the vlogging test of the Sony A6100 and the Canon EOS M200. Two very small, two very portable, compact, mirrorless APS-C size cameras. And they're both set to auto, which Canon seems to be struggling with a little bit on that auto exposure. But yeah, this is the vlogging test. Neither of these cameras has in-body image stabilization. I do have the Canon's electronic image stabilization turned on, and they both have their kit lenses on, which have optical image stabilization. So maybe you can tell a difference here. I don't know. I can't actually see right now. You totally can. But yeah, this is the image quality out of both. I do have, because the Sony can do it, the Sony's recording in 4K. The Canon can do 4K, but it would be like a huge crop. We'd be looking at this on the Canon, and then I would lose the good autofocus, which if you're gonna be vlogging, whoa, goodness, there was a hole there. If you're gonna be vlogging, you're gonna want to use the autofocus on a camera to be as good as possible. We have these set to auto because, you know, I'm sick of like dialing everything in perfectly, so maybe the shutter blur is gonna be a little bit different. But yeah, either of these cameras I think would work perfectly fine. The A6100 obviously will give you a better 4K image. The M200 is a little bit easier to use because the touchscreen can do all the focusing. But yeah, how's it look? I can definitely tell that we're having some dynamic range problems, but that's because the sun is right there. It is definitely pretty bright outside today, which, you know, that's when you want to go out and you want to live your life. You want to go out and have fun when it's nice outside. You don't always just want to wait until golden hour or right as the morning comes up, so whatever. This is the image quality. This is the vlogging test of both. I'm going to go out and enjoy the lake a little bit more. You guys head back to the studio and talk to future Ted, who's trapped inside. Okay, see you back there.
And we're back. I love carrying around small portable cameras. It's so much better than the big old monsters we get from time to time. Like my shoulder can only take so much. I'm getting to be an old man. Though those features, both video quality and ease of use, are important, when you buy a camera, you buy into a system. So how does the ecosystem or the upgrade path look here? This seems like it should be closer, and honestly, it has become closer in the last few weeks, but Sony just wins. Sony just wins in the ecosystem department, basically against almost every other camera brand. Any E-mount lens that you buy to use in the A6100 could be used on any other Sony camera. Not only that, but they already have basically every type of lens that you can want, from wide angle to primes to everything. They even have third-party full-frame lenses that cost less than anything else in the market, but work darn near as good, if not as good as OEM lenses. Don't get me wrong, with the new Sigma primes that are now out for practically every APS-C body, Canon EFM included, there are great options for both, and now you do have the capability to get those excellent lenses on these cameras. And you can even get an EFM adapter to use EF and EFS glass on this body like it's native. But you can also get an adapter to do the same thing on the Sony. Look, I'm straight up, when it comes to ecosystem, it's tough. It's really tough to beat Sony today. Maybe in a few years with the RF lenses, maybe they get some more EFM out there, but right now Sony's got it on lock. But you didn't come here for that. You came here for a definitive statement. And at the end of the day, so what, right? Which of these two comes out on top? And I've been waiting for this whole part. This is gonna be my favorite part of the video because I think this will surprise you. But after all of this, I easily recommend the M200 over the A6100. I know the A6100 won more of these categories, right? Why does the M200 win? Well, it's $300 cheaper, and because of that price difference, you can get some nice glass to go with the meh kit lens. It's got good enough image quality, good enough audio quality, and it's easy enough to use that I think this is a great starter camera. And if you're looking at their lower end, you're looking for a starter camera. This actually shouldn't be that big of a surprise because I don't really recommend the A6100 at all, because for the price, you could invest just a little bit more and get far more functionality out of the A6400, which is really the best Sony APS-C camera to buy hands down at any price point. It might be one of the best cameras on the market right now. So yes, the M200 wins, which is pretty awesome. But you know what? If you like this video, I bet you'd like to actually see the comparison of the A6100 and the A6400, which you can find by clicking here. Go ahead, click, clickety, click, 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 click. Which, if you didn't know, was incredibly awkward to write into the script. Click here. Thanks for watching.